systems, and I'm going to be talking about supplier diversity and best practices. In my findings, a lot of people don't know who AIAG is and what we do, so I figured I would start the presentation by just giving a brief overview of the company, and then I'll transition into supplier diversity. Okay, so this is our North American operation. We're located in Farmington Hills, Michigan. That's my office, and we have 4 sites in North America. Our Monterey, Mexico facility, St. Mary's, Ontario, Canada, Springfield, Kentucky, and Bessemer, Alabama. This is a breakdown of the applications that we manufacture, our OEM customers, and the actual locations. As the interior supplier, we have a number of applications we support. That's a good indication of what we do and the different manufacturing applications that we have. So I thought that might be helpful. We're known for instrument panels, consoles, door trim. So, okay, so I want to get into the supplier diversity and best practices. Here's a decent overview of what I would like to cover. So I'll start, we're talking about diversity programming, going into corporate and social responsibility, breaking down some of the best practices, introducing discussion about some of the trends, and having some data to support the trends, and then kind of wrap up. And then if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I would greatly appreciate if you hold off on the questions until the Q&A portion. That'd be helpful for me. Okay, so by and large, diversity and inclusion has been a long recognized and vitally important to the growth and the development of the industry and the economy. Many companies, Fortune 500, multinational, small companies, create policies that encourage the hiring of diverse employees, partnering with disadvantaged businesses, owners, minorities, women, veteran-owned businesses, and also members of the LGBT community. From a program perspective, there are programs, MBEs, which are called Minority Business Enterprises, WBEs, which are Women Business Enterprises, the LGBT community, the CVE, which is a Certified Veteran-Owned Enterprise, the SBA, which is a Small Business Enterprise, and the Hub Zone, which it supports historically underutilized businesses. From a supplier diversity perspective, when you establish a program, it basically encourages the use of minority-owned, women-owned, veteran-owned, and LGBT-owned communities or businesses, and also veteran-owned businesses. The National Supplier Development Council is the actual network of minority-owned businesses. It's based out of New York. They have over 1,750 corporate members. These are including top publicly owned businesses, privately owned businesses, foreign businesses. They have regional councils like the one here in Michigan. It's called the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council throughout the actual country. They have over 12,000 minority-owned businesses. They include Asian, Black, Hispanic, and Native American businesses. What you will find is also there are subsets of those groups that are a part of the National Minority Supplier Development Council that have established their own specific council for their origin, like the Asian and Pacific American Chamber of Commerce. This is a 501c6 nonprofit membership organization based out of Farmington Hills, Michigan, actually. And they advocate for the inclusion of Asian and Pacific American owned, certified owned businesses. You take a look at the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. This is the largest Hispanic business advocacy group based in the United States. They were established in 1979, and they're based out of Washington, D.C. The Chamber promotes the economic growth of and development of Hispanic or Latino-owned businesses. They make up nearly 4.3 million owned businesses in the U.S. and contribute to over $700 billion in our economy. And one of the larger and emerging councils is the Women's Business Enterprise National Council. They all roll up through the National Minority Supply Development Council, but once again, a lot of these actual specific groups have established their own spinoffs. So the Women Business Enterprise National Council is the largest certifier of women-owned businesses and one of the leading advocates for women business owners and entrepreneurs. The National Gay Lesbian it's called the National Gay Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, but it also includes the transgender community as well. It's the only national advocacy organization dedicated to advocacy for LGBT community member entrepreneurs. They have over a third of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States recognize the certification within their businesses. Another emerging group is the National Veteran Business Development Council. I actually just met with Toyota, and they are now recognizing these entrepreneurs as certified minority businesses, so this is a huge deal. They are the only third-party veteran-owned business certification program in the United States. It's a 501c3 organization, and its purpose is to advocate to provide credible and reliable veteran-owned businesses support. The Small Business Administration, should be Administration, says Association, was created in 1953 to support small businesses to pursue their dream. This is a government agency that is the only cabinet level federal agency fully dedicated to advocate for small businesses. Hub zones are historically underutilized business zones in rural communities and urban communities, and they're specifically they specifically help gain preferential access in the procurement process. All right, we'll talk about corporate responsibility. We had a presenter that came in here and talked about corporate responsibility, and it kind of aligns with supplier diversity. This is a strategic alliance between corporate and social responsibility teams, and the goal is to align the agendas so they can both advocate to diversify, to have diversity and inclusion with their supplier base. So now we'll get into some of the best practices. To ensure the success of supplier diversity programs, these are a couple of ideas that can help. So we'll get into leadership. So the first thing, and these are my findings as well, because I'm actually, as I started doing this research, I inquired with our leaders in my company to figure out, do we even have a supplier diversity program, which we don't. So this is actually beneficial for me because I'm taking the research that I've done throughout this program to actually implement a supplier diversity program at my company. So this has been pretty helpful. So the first step is really engaging your leadership. If the leadership doesn't have any interest, program won't work. You have to actually get engaged, get the buy-in, show the value. So from decisions and commitments that come from the top of the most companies, this is going to actually make your business case stronger when you have your leadership behind you, and you have to have data to support why this is valued. You have to establish goals, and the goals need to be SMART. SMART as in specific, measurable, attainable, relative, and time bound. It's okay to have a 5% goal or 10% goal, but at the end of the day, you want to be in a position where you can actually clearly measure your goals. Critical in the process is partnerships, establishing partnerships that cater to small and diverse businesses. Once you've established your goal, once you've got the buy-in from your leadership, you have to actually figure out a way to partner with people that can support you to have a successful a successful diversity program. So organizations like the Women's Business Enterprise National Development Council, the Small Business Administration, the National Supplier Development Council, these are all organizations that can help you launch a successful diversity program. You also have to create a database, and you need to capture a lot of information. You have to make sure that you distinguish the different market segments. I know we're all in automotive, but for people that might be in other business segments, you need to make sure you capture all of the business segments. You need to also get the size of the company, sales revenue, understand the environmental certifications, and their current diversity status. And the big deal is promoting. You know, a lot of times, you know, we do things and we don't talk about it. These are great tools to promote the program. So one of the things that we did recently, we became a corporate member of the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council. So as a majority-owned business, you're paying to be a part of these organizations, but they actually provide value and resources so you can find suppliers that are diverse. They do all of the vetting. They offer trainings, so it's a great opportunity to have a successful diversity program by joining organizations. I've listed a couple: the Alliance of Supplier Diversity Professionals, the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council, which I mentioned, and my company is a member of, the Council of Supplier Diversity Professionals, and the Institute for Supply Management. It's also a good idea to attend networking events so you can meet other professionals. You can meet other majority-owned businesses that have gone through the process of establishing a supply diversity program, that may actually have a network of suppliers, of quality suppliers that are diverse as well. And also from a learning perspective, a number of these organizations provide continued education. The Alliance of Supplier Development, diverse professionals, the Council of Supplier Diversity Professionals, they offer training. ISM actually offers a certification, is a certified professional supplier diversity. And then the Michigan Minority Supplier Development Council, they have a new program called Infuse. And Infuse is a great opportunity. I actually just became a part of that program, and now I have a mentor who is the head of diversity for Valio. And what he's doing is providing best practices to help me establish a diversity program with my company. So what they do is they have a mentor and a mentee. You have a 1-year commitment. You have to actually have discussions, and they basically mentor you to establish a successful diversity program. So it's a pretty good tool. Okay, so to make sure that I'm not just blowing smoke, here's some data that I was able to find. I talked to Lori and I was encouraged to try to find some data. So I used a tool called Supplier IO, and they're one of the industry leaders with diversity data. So let's take a look at some visual aids, and it might actually tell the story. So from a maturity perspective, the question in the actual visual aid says, how long has your diversity program been in place? The findings is that small companies that are less than 1,000 employees and larger companies that have more than 20,000 employees have actually had diversity programs for 10 plus years. But on the other hand, there's companies that are between 1,000 and 20,000. Their programs are not as mature. This slide talks about some of the drivers. You know, why are people establishing supplier diversity programs? Well, one of the major drivers, corporate responsibility, as we talked about, your customer requirements. So for you guys that work for FCA, you know, you guys are driving tier 1s and tier 2s to establish these programs. The corporate culture, you know, you may have a change in leadership and they may see value in diversifying your supplier network. And actually the government actually, if you want to do business with the government, they have compliance laws that says you have to allocate X amount of business to diverse suppliers, or you can be at a risk of, you know, losing contracts. So, you know, if the customers, the corporate culture, if they're driving the the initiative to try to establish a more diverse supplier base, you will see some changes because we all want to retain our business. Next slide, with regards of finding diverse suppliers, also a challenge, and this is a great way to see value in some of these organizations that we mentioned. If you take a look, certification agencies like the ones I mentioned were the leading cause of how people were having success with finding diverse suppliers. Of the companies that participated in the survey, 75% of them said that the certification agencies were critical in us finding quality suppliers. From a tier 1 place where I'm in, what is the percentage of spend with diverse suppliers? So of the suppliers that participated in the actual survey, you had 0 to 5% that had, 33% had 0 to 5% of their suppliers spend with diverse suppliers. You had 31% of the suppliers that reported out that stated that they had greater than 15% of their suppliers spend with diverse companies. 12% that were within 5 or 10% of their spend, and then 24% of the suppliers had 10 to 15% of their spend with diverse suppliers. In the small business side, the question is, do you actually have a program to count small business as diverse suppliers? Small companies within that are less than 1,000 employees and large companies with more than 20,000 employees overwhelmingly had an actual program to include small businesses as in their diversity spend. On the other hand, you have businesses that have within 1,000 to 20,000 employees that were about 50-50 reporting out small businesses in their diversity spend. From a tier 2 perspective, which my company operates in a tier 1 and tier 2, depending on the customer, do you measure tier 2 diverse supplier spend? Large companies, 5,000 plus employees in the service focused industries measured their spend far more than smaller companies, which were less than 5,000 employees and in the product focused industries. From a program personnel perspective, question in the survey, how many full-time resource workers do you have for your supplier diversity program? I found this one very critical because you can advocate for supplier diversity, but you have to spend the money to have the actual resources in your organization to put the work in. Well, people are saying that they value supplier diversity, but they're not putting the heads in their organizations to do the work. There's a significant shortfall in necessary resources to manage supplier diversity programs. 60% of the suppliers who were participants in the survey had one or less heads to manage their supplier diversity program. Now, we all work, and I'm sure if you're a one-man army, you're not going to get, or you'll get your job done because you want to get paid, but you may be more successful if you had more people allocated to support in that role. So one of my takeaways is, how are you going to have a successful program if you don't have the talent to manage the program? It's kind of tough to have one or less than one person responsible for an entire supplier diversity program. Here's the big one here, the money. How do you measure the return on the investment of a supplier diversity program? 43% of the companies, they don't measure the ROI with regards to supplier diversity. So it's kind of a tough thing to try to show your value, but then you're not even capturing the return on the investment. I thought that was interesting. And then just finally, from a perspective of the future of supply diversity, we live in a society that's becoming more and more diverse. So becoming mandatory in the procurement process, I mean, that's a big deal. If you are having your customers or just a corporate culture saying that when you're doing your RFQs and you need to make sure you include a diverse supplier in there, that's going to change how you go out and network with your suppliers. So the new wave is this is going to become more of a mandatory trend, and it's going to be important for all of the majority companies to have some type of diversity program in place. Also, having better resources to locate diverse suppliers is also another trend. I thought that it was interesting about leadership. You know, you could say that you talk to the head of your organization and they support it, but this is saying that the shift is that the overall culture of the company is actually in agreement with advocating for diversity spend with your supplier base, not just the one person. So I thought it was really good. So in conclusion, having a formal supplier diversity program is a key characteristic of all industry leaders. 92% of the top Forbes companies have formal supplier diversity programs in their supply chain, their diversity and inclusion programs in their human resource department, workplace or corporate citizenship endeavors. But leave it aside, industry leader status companies across the world are increasingly required to demonstrate supplier diversity, whether by industry custom, specific regulation. For these companies, negative financial reputation implications can result from not having a viable program in place, and can also have penalties from contractual obligations from the tier 1 and tier 2 space, suppliers utilizing reporting, and even simply losing business because you're not complicit or you're not complying with supply diversity practices. So more and more in the world that we live in, this is becoming more commonplace, and I think that we all need to get on board and try to establish these programs because this is the new wave. That concludes the presentation. Any questions?
I have a question. So as you're implementing the program at your company, what are some of the bottlenecks or challenges that you see?
Well, my president attended an event with me. It's called the ACE Awards. This is hosted by the Michigan Minority Supply Development Council, and I kind of tricked him into it. So my director was supposed to go. My director is from Canada, and he commutes to the States Monday through Friday, likes to leave a little early on Fridays. So he had to go back with his family. So I said, well, we paid for these 2 tickets. I don't want to waste them. So I figured, who else can I have go? So I went to the president of my company. I said, hey, his name is Roger. I said, hey, Roger, well, my director, Mark, he can't make it. I just figured, we don't talk a lot, so I got a great event to go to and thought you might want to hang out with me. So he was like, okay, I'll go. So what he saw was that a number of our competitors were big time sponsors. A lot of their signage was out. I said, now you see the value. Now you see all of our competitors and major customers, they are really invested in this program, and why there's a need for us to kind of have some visibility. So really getting him to that program was really the jump start, like I talked about in the slide about having leadership buy-in. Him going to that program, he saw it, seeing all of these competitors and OEM customers that are all about this program and getting awards and sponsoring. It kind of that actually the light bulb, if you will, came on. Any other questions?